It's the Fulhamish podcast, your independent voice of Fulham FC. My name's Sammy James. Welcome to the show. Today, we're going to look at Fulham's first transfer of the summer 2026 window. Don't worry, you're not in a coma. It is still March, but Fulham have done some business early. Oh my word. Ricardo Pepi has reached a verbal agreement to join Fulham. We'll discuss what that means for our striking options going forward. We'll have the final word on Forest. We'll look ahead to Burnley and probably mention a certain Scott Parker. And then at the end, I've got a little combined 11 for Jack to enjoy. It is a Thursday club, although it's a day early. Our timings are all off this week, but I would like to wish a happy St. Patrick's Day to Jack Collins.
Thank you, Sammy. Happy St. Patrick's Day to you as well.
And you're wearing emerald green just to celebrate the occasion.
I do my very, very best, right? Like, I wear green most of the time anyway. Like, all my coats are green. But, you know, I felt like I'd brighten it up for today of all days. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Thank you. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Happy St. Pepi's Day.
Oh, my word. What a seg. Ricardo Pepi, it's been given the here we go treatment literally just before we started recording. Thank you, transfer gods. This is obviously not one that's a huge shock. We knew this might be coming. Ricardo Pepi, obviously USA striker. He plays for PSV. He's going to probably be at the World Cup with America this summer. And yeah, we tried to sign him in January. We didn't get the deal across the line. 36 million euros. And yeah, I mean, Fabrizio Romano, I know that he's not flavour of the month, but he's given it here we go.
Rick Elfrink wrote this.
Okay.
Shout out Rick, my favourite Dutch journalist.
Mine too. Initial thoughts. Obviously, we've literally not had too much time to digest this. But it does suggest that, you know, next season, a bit of a shake-up's coming.
Yeah, I mean, look, I was under the kind of illusion that I thought Raul was going to kind of wrap his time with us this summer anyway. I'm sure that recent circumstances might have maybe proliferated some of that as well. So there is, you know, a sense, like, I would have loved this to have been done in January, to have 6 months under Raul, because I think there are very few strikers who'd be a better kind of role model for you know, any young striker in terms of how their career has gone and what it's been like. So, like, there's plenty to kind of, you know, look at in that perspective. But I think it will probably be 1 for 1, and it will ultimately be one of those moments that we look at and say, okay, that's kind of 1 out, 1 in. More competition for Rodrigo Muniz, expensive competition for Rodrigo Muniz. 36 million euros, around 29 million pounds. I think can just kind of loose
expensive,
maths.
but not like stupid. Like Palace just spent 50 million on Jurgen Strand Larsen.
Yeah, I know, but also that's Premier League pedigree. So therefore you can kind of look at that in a slightly different
Champions
way.
League pedigree?
Yeah, I mean, look, I really like Ricardo Pepi, and the reason I really like him is because there are only so many times you can be right place, right time, whilst being lucky. And I think we're past that with Pepi. He's just a striker that seems to sniff out opportunities. He's someone who kind of is a little bit different to what we have right now, in that he's a bit of a penalty box predator. He scores most of his goals from inside the area. He's on the end of crosses. He likes a little slip through ball in behind. Like, he's a different type of striker, still relatively physically strong, but a little bit more kind of on the last man, on the shoulder, than perhaps what we have at the moment. And look, we've been crying out for differing striking options for a little while. One of the main complaints we had for quite some time was that Raul and Muniz can't really play together because they're actually slightly too similar. I think this maybe would allow you to play 2 strikers together at the end of a game, or in certain circumstances that might change things up. So worth bearing all of those things in mind. But he's had a really interesting career. He went across to Augsburg in Germany, did okay, and then made the move to Groningen in the Netherlands, did well enough there that PSV picked him up, sat as kind of second fiddle for a long time to Luc de Jong, who was club captain, club legend, but had an incredible goals per game record because he'd come on and score on a really, really regular basis. Kind of took up the mantle this season of that number 9. It's been blighted by injuries, it is worth pointing out, and that's never a great sign. But, you know, when he has been given his opportunity this season, he's still been excellent in terms of his output, in terms of the way that he sniffs out goals. I'm just a big fan of the way that he operates. He doesn't seem like a striker who gets too high, too low about a number of different things. He seems to, you know, if he misses a big opportunity, he'll take the next one that comes along. I think that he is someone who will translate a little better to the Premier League. I think I said this right back in January when Dan and I were talking about, you know, potential transfers, etc., that I think he translates better because he's the kind of striker that doesn't use his physical presence to dominate in the Eredivisie in a way that you wouldn't be able to do in the Premier League. It might translate better because those skill sets are more applicable. If you are super physically dominant in the Eredivisie, that doesn't necessarily, operate in the same way in the Premier League. It can do, but it doesn't always translate. Whereas if you're someone who's very smart, switched on, can read space, can interpret that, can operate in it, that tends to work, I think, a little bit better. So I'm genuinely really excited about this.
Yeah, I mean, I get sort of Andy Johnson vibes, sort of.
Bigger, but yes.
And
El Tren.
I can't remember the last player that we've had who has been a natural finisher. I know that Mitrovic scored a lot of goals, and obviously, yeah, he could finish, don't get me wrong, but he was never fought. He was physical. We've had physical strikers for a long time. Maybe Josh Maja? I mean, not that he did it particularly well, but like...
Yeah, I'm not sure we're going to include that.
But I mean, like, I'm just saying...
I don't know if Josh Maja was a natural finisher. I'm not 100% sure what Josh Maja was really at this point.
Play.
But like... Yeah,
I mean, you mentioned injuries. Obviously, he's had some quite bad knee injuries. His current injury is an arm injury.
So this isn't a worry.
This isn't some sort of checkered injury record. He had a bad knee injury.
He's had a couple, I think, of bad knee injuries
in 2024, and he missed about half a year with that. And that's the concern, right? Is we haven't got the squad depth in order to sustain.
We say that, but we also lost Rodrigo Muniz for about half of the season this year.
Yeah, and we've got lucky that the other striker has managed to stay fit that whole time, because it could have been a car crash if there hadn't have been that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, things happen, right? Injuries happen. We know these things can take place, but yeah, the only concern I have really is that injury record. The transition period, the way that he plays, I think would actually fit quite nicely.
The thing that's, I think you've sort of alluded to this, but from my kind of limited watching of Pepi, and I have said this before, so I apologise for anyone that's heard this before, but he's a clutch player. He's a player that scores winners. Like he scores
goals.
And he seems to be in the right place at the right time in the 90th minute. And I always just think that is a great sign, because a player that not only finds those positions, but actually he gets that moment in that position and takes the chance. I always think that's an exciting player to sign, because what scenarios could we use him for Fulham? And also he is a player who seems not happy. I'm sure he's not happy about it, but he's used as a sub a lot. And he seems okay in that role and able to make an impact. And if we are bringing in Pepi, but it's under the kind of pecking order of, well, Rodrigo Muniz is probably going to be first choice number 9, although I'm sure he'll give him a good run for his money.
I think this is going to... I do think what's interesting about this is... And look, the potential knock-on effect on Muniz as well is worth considering. I think that he went into this season as first choice number 9, Rodrigo Muniz. Like, it was going to be, his opportunity to kind of line himself up as the guy, and Raul would be the veteran backup. The fact that Fulham are now stretching for a younger player who they're spending, the best part of £30 million on, which, as you say, is not like absolute break the bank territory, but it is still a relatively big fee, in terms of what we've paid out in recent years. It's still right up there. Like, that is now a kind of, okay, we're bringing in someone who's competing with you. This is you two to duel it out for that shirt. I think that's a good thing. Like, obviously people want to play every week, and it's great to have a striker who leads the line week in, week out. But I think having someone to push you, and having, especially with these two, where we know that Rodrigo Muniz has kind of streaks of form, right? We need someone to push him into those streaks of form. And Pepi is a player who has shown a real kind of level of consistency. I think this is a good match. And as I said before, like, the fact that Pepi is a little bit more of an off-the-shoulder finisher, there is that possibility that, a formation shift could see them both play together at the top, which would be very, very interesting for a side that get the ball in the box a lot.
I cannot believe we're here on the 17th of March and have basically made a transfer. Obviously, a lot of the hard work in this was done in January, kind of under probably the we needed to keep Marco happy, right? We obviously signed Oscar Bob. We nearly got Pepi done. Is this a change? Like, Fulham doing business effectively? That's now 2 transfers for next season. If you consider that Oscar Bob was a bit of a kind of like, he's doing a bit of a job this season, but he's also kind of a signing for next season. We've now got Ricardo Pepi, done before the World Cup. which I'm sure was in his interests and our interests as well. Like that's his future kind of
Locked
sorted.
up. Yeah.
It feels like we'll be coming back in July and, not all the pieces of the puzzle are completed, but certainly that's a big piece of the jigsaw kind of locked in.
Yeah, look, it's good to see us being proactive in the market. Like, it's not all that often you see this kind of thing happen where clubs agree a fee and agree a deal outside of the transfer window. So it's worth bearing that in mind. It does happen. It's not like, and also a lot of these things happen, hands are shaken, and the contracts are stored until, July 1. So the fact that it's public, I think, is interesting. And I wonder if that's Fulham putting a marker down and being like, look, marker, we've not just done the deal, we've announced it. Or, it's been announced or leaked to be like, okay, here's a player that you liked, here's a player that you wanted. There's also a contract on the table there for you, pal. You can sign it whenever you like. I do wonder if it's been done here before the international break on purpose. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And also Fulham's rich vein of full Americans continuing. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen to Jedi. I mean, I think his future at Fulham is fairly locked, but obviously he could be subject to transfer interest.
Yeah, I think
summer.
Him having a down season by his standards, by anyone's standards really, is probably a good thing for him remaining at the club.
But there's obviously a chance he could have gone in the summer, but now we will still have an American within
the great thread continues.
I mean, that's been about 20 years that Fulham have always had an American in the squad.
Yeah.
The tradition continues. Manchester United always have an academy player in their team. Fulham always have an American. It's
important. It's important for morale.
Yeah, it's particularly exciting. By the way, if you're on YouTube, you might just see my come on then. If you want to, come on then. I brought my dog in today, Taffy. Here she is. She's on camera right now. She's being a right little pain. She just wants to jump on someone's lap. So here's the dog. Say hello to everyone, Taffy. Anyway, right, we'll continue. Final word on Forest from Sunday. A 0-0 draw. They don't come around too often under Marco. Look, I spoke about it on the Monday podcast. I still think that ultimately it's a decent point. We didn't play well and we probably deserve to lose. But a point, you take it. And actually, when you look at the rest of the league, and now we know the result of Brentford's game against Wolves, they threw away a 2-goal lead to only draw themselves. I don't think it's done a massive amount of damage.
No, it hasn't. And I think that is important. But equally, it was a missed opportunity, I think, as well. We weren't very good. And we definitely, I don't think, deserved to win the game. But if you look at the way that the opportunities fell, obviously that first one falling to Calvin Bassey, and it's a good save from Matt Sells. Look, either side of the keeper, it's in, sure, but he's launched himself at a ball into the box and made good contact with it. Most of the time, I think you score at that point. So that would have maybe changed things a little bit. And then obviously we get away with two calls. First the penalty call, and then, a little bit later on the goal. Just after that, Fulham have probably their best spell of the game. There's the Rodrigo Muniz chance that's headed off the line by Ola Aina. And then, later on, and apart from that, there's, the corner that follows. Sasha Lukic volleys just wide on the follow-up. And, if one of those chances goes in, I do think the air comes out of the City ground. I think it's one of those, but you can point to a variety of different Forest chances. And I think on the balance of play, a point was probably the most we deserved over the course of the 90 minutes. So yes and no, it was a bit of a drab game. And look, it's something I want to kind of talk about a little bit more later on in the podcast. But it just feels like Fulham are playing a little bit handbrake on at the moment. Like a little bit like we are a little scared to go and express ourselves in the final third, scared to put extra bodies into the box. We're watching, these build-ups, which are quite slow and ponderous. And look, I don't subscribe to the whole sideways and backwards everywhere we go kind of chat. I think that you have to build a team up. And the way that Marco Silva wants to play involves a lot of kind of working the opposition around at times and kind of opening up those spaces for players to exploit. But I don't think we're getting enough third man runners into the box. I don't think we're getting enough in terms of players taking shots in areas where they might be able to unleash from. And whilst I don't want, Sander Berge shooting from 35 yards, I do think that if you are getting these opportunities of fashioning in the box, taking a pot shot, having a deflection, winning set pieces, etc., is not a bad thing in this quite combustible but also physical Premier League, where a goal can really break a game open in a different kind of way and might open you up to it. So there's a frustration with me in the kind of manner I think we're playing in at the moment, where everything just feels very ponderous. And I think it would just be good, going forward this season. And I don't think this is going to change against Burnley, if I'm honest. I still think we will feel that we'll win that game and that it will be fine. But actually, if you're kind of thinking about how we're probably going to approach it, I can't see us going out to blitz Burnley. And look, that's been a feature of the Premier League this season. Like, there has been far less batterings handed out from anyone. And I think that it is a much closer competition from top to bottom, which is why there is this concertina in the middle. I enjoyed that on Stadio. It's called the DRS train in the middle of the Premier League, with everyone just sort of slipstreaming each other in the middle of the pack for those European places. But I just think that if this season is going to fall short in terms of European adventure, it's obviously already fallen short in terms of the Carabao and the FA Cup, that we won't be going any further in either competition. Like, I'd like to see us go out in a bit of a blaze. And look, if this is to be the end of Marco Silva's tenure, I'd like to see him kind of try and, floor it in some ways with sort of 8 games of the season remaining. What have we got to lose? We're not going to be dragged into a relegation battle. It's not like we need to conserve ourselves for cup games, etc. Like, floor it, see what happens, and really kind of try and let this team enjoy their football, because I think that's probably the best way to go about getting into European competition. If everyone else is nervous and kind of picky with it, and you see it with Brentford against Wolves on Monday, 2-0 up, and they kind of fall apart. And to be honest, they were a little bit lucky to hang on in the end. Like, I feel like you have to go for teams, and if you do sit back, you're going to be punished in this Premier League. And right now, I feel like Fulham are right in the heart of that.
What do you think of the decision to bring back Anderson on Sunday in for Diop? I thought it was a pretty harsh call, and I think everyone else on the podcast agreed. Interesting article that went up today, though, on the Fulhamish website by Matt Littlejohn, who writes some fantastic articles on
he's
the
really,
Fulhamish,
really good writer.
on the Fulhamish website. It's so worth reading. And the article is called In Defence of Joachim Anderson. And Matt's opinion is, well, it's not opinion really, statistically, he's written, he thinks he's Fulham's best defender by a lot. And some of the stats here are pretty eye-opening. Like, the eye test for me, I've not been impressed by Anderson this season, but his defensive contributions is one of the highest in the league. His CBIT, I didn't know about this, but clearances, blocks, interceptions and tackles per 90 is the second highest, just behind Jorge Cuenca, and a lot higher than Issa Diop. His accurate long balls is the third highest in the league, behind Fabian Schär and Rodri. Like, there are some pretty impressive stats there about Joachim Anderson. But then again, on the other hand, I still kind of think that when I watch Anderson, when I watch Diop, I feel a lot more comfortable when Diop's in the team than Anderson.
Yeah, I mean, look, defensive stats are a really hard thing to kind of comprehend, understand, work with. And there's some good pieces in The Athletic about this, actually, this week, about the fact that it's always been difficult to kind of quantify defensive contributions, because a lot of defenders who are seen as top tier don't actually have to do that much defending. It's just when they are, asked to do that. You look at Virgil van Dijk, and it's a bit sometimes called the Van Dijk paradox. He doesn't do all that much in terms of statistical numbers, because he's not actually asked to defend all that much, because Liverpool were a side that dominated the ball. And I think that you can probably understand Fulham's defensive numbers a little bit better, because we're kind of halfway down the pack, right? In terms of how much we attack, how much we defend. It's a pretty balanced side in that regard. But I do think that sometimes what we see from those kind of things is, let's just say that Joachim Anderson plays, how do you skew that against all the teams he's played against, as opposed to, I don't know, Jorge Cuenca or Issa Diop, and the games that they've faced against different opposition, where we've had good games, bad games, sure, but like, they've tended to come in for easier fixtures, you'd imagine, cup games up to this point. Like, all of those things are a little bit difficult to quantify. And so therefore, defensive numbers aren't everything. The eye test is important. But I also do think that Joachim Anderson's come in for some undue stick at times this season, especially when the players he's been surrounded by aren't necessarily the ones that's complementing his skill set the best. Yeah.
And also, ultimately, like, it's fair enough that maybe the defensive comparisons against other defenders in the league are quite hard to judge, but his numbers do stack up there. You just wonder what the future is really for Anderson going into this summer, right? We've obviously signed him on quite a big deal. It's 2 years out of a 4 or 5 year contract, depending on whether we trigger the option. If there is any resale in Joachim Andersen left, if there is any way of recouping some of that money, you imagine that this summer is the summer where you probably, like a Joachim Andersen with a year to go and another year, of around the planet, it's not going to be the most valuable. You wonder what Fulham do. I mean, so much of this obviously just rests on the whole Marco Silva question, right? Because if it is a completely different manager, then maybe they would look at Joachim Andersen and go, not for me. But if Marco Silva's still here, there's clearly still a hell of a lot of trust, given the fact that he has dropped Issa Diop for no real good reason.
I still don't think there's loads of a market, if I'm honest. Like, I think that that's going to be something that Fulham would struggle to move on. I also think it's important to kind of stick with what you have in certain situations. So we're talking about Joachim Andersen here. Actually, I think that there's obviously been a lot of debate around Bassi and Cuenca, notably here, but like also around the fan base. And if Calvin Bassey was to move on this summer, let's say the right offer came in for Calvin Bassey, I don't think he will, for what it's worth, but if he was, then you have a left-sided centre-back who you know is capable of stepping up into that role. If that happened, I think you'd have to change your right centre-back, because I don't think that you can have two ball-playing, excellent footballing centre-backs who probably lack a little bit of the physicality that you need, especially in the Premier League in the state that it's currently in. And so at that point, maybe you do think about making that move. If you're not going to do that and Bassey doesn't leave, yes, Issa Diop has been more than capable, and look, I'm with you in that I think it was harsh for him to be dropped, but I also thought Anderson was okay at the weekend.
Did you?
Yeah,
really?
I thought he was fine.
I thought he looked so vulnerable, and we got away with it, but I felt like most of Forest's chances came from the fact that we had such a slow back line, and Anderson is obviously the key contributing factor to that. Maybe.
I just think that when you're looking at the amount we play through him when he's on the pitch and what he kind of looks to operate. Look, I'm not suggesting this was Joachim Andersen's best game in a Fulham shirt or anything like that. I just thought that maybe, and as much as I have with maybe Sander Berger of late or whatever, the criticism maybe gets louder when it comes to, certain players who are perceived to play in a certain way. Now, yes, obviously both the penalty shout and the offside goal come down Andersen's channel. But it is also Bassey that gives away the penalty, in inverted commas. And on top of that, you're looking at it and thinking, okay, the offside line there that does step up, and look, it's incredibly harsh, obviously. The Dan and Doy's heel is the thing that ends up kind of kicking off what is the offside. And that you can be offside in that regard is weird in itself, right? But when you're looking at it and you're saying, well, who's actually organised that trap? Well, it's Andersen. Andersen is the person who kind of leads this defensive line, who sets them up, and what ultimately does result in us getting a point. You can point to luck and you can point to all of those things, and obviously you have to have an element of all of that. But if Fulham don't play a very tight offside line there, both there's a penalty and a goal that take place. And I think that's organised relatively well. It's obviously been something that Fulham have worked on. Now, we've only just got away with it, but equally we have got away with it. And when you're asking a defence there to revolve around Joachim Andersen's leadership, you are asking Calvin Bassey to track in behind, so to make sure that runners don't get away from them. And then you're asking whoever's playing left back to make that run in inside as well in order to cover the winger who's coming in on the far side. You're asking Kenny Tete to get in behind and make blocks when Andersen is bypassed. But that's the setup, right? Like that's what Fulham are trying to do, I think, in those areas. And the way that we're building out with Andersen and the way that he takes the ball and allows Fulham to kind of step forward, he also pushes defensives back, right? Just from sheer being on the pitch, because they know that he can spray that diagonal. What did you say? There was only Rodri and one other that were able to, claim better accuracy per long passes over a 90-minute spell. Fabian Schär.
Yeah.
Who's excellent, by the way, but also broken. And you're looking at that and thinking, okay, so defensive lines are taking steps backwards because they know that diagonal is on and they know that diagonal is a weapon. And you think back to the Brighton game, right? And the pass that he plays for Chukwueze to actually level the scores. That's because the Brighton defence don't take into account that Joachim Andersen can play that pass. So in terms of what he offers to this team, is he the perfect centre-back? No, but if he was, he wouldn't be playing for Fulham. And if you're looking at what he brings to the table from both an offensive and a defensive sense, I still think he's a net positive to this team.
Yeah, completely. Obviously, Fulham now in 11th position, 4 points off Brentford in 7th. And we still think that 7th and 8th are likely to be European places. The deal with that, as far as I understand, obviously England needs to be confirmed as one of the top 2 UEFA coefficient nations, which if I'm not mistaken, I think obviously the first legs of the European.
It felt like more of a guarantee a couple of weeks ago, but I still think it'll happen.
It's still pretty likely. And then what we need, obviously, a Champions League finishing team will win the Carabao Cup, so there's no issue there. I mean, Man City really would need quite the demise.
That's going to be fine. It's you need then a team that finishes in the top 5 to also win the top 6
to win the FA Cup.
Well, actually, it's the top 7 if there's 5 Champions League places. So you need a team that's already in the Europa League or the Champions League to win the FA Cup, because the Europa League space is given by the FA Cup. The reason Palace aren't in it this year is because of that weird financial thing where they effectively swapped with Forest. There is also the possibility, and I would say it's not likely, but it's not impossible either. But if Villa were to finish outside the Champions League spaces and win the Europa League, which I don't think is that distinctly weird,
well, they're the
as
favourites.
A possibility. They're favourites to win the Europa League, and also they're on a bizarre slide from a Premier League perspective. They'd still need, we'd still need a few things to go our way. That would effectively make 6th a Champions League spot as well, which means that 7th and 8th would become Europa League spots, and 9th could become a Conference League spot. So there is plenty to play for left in this discussion, right? And even if that doesn't happen, 8th is still likely to be a Conference League spot at the very least. So there's plenty of spaces to play for here, right? And maybe we're talking about really 7th and 8th. I don't think anyone in the top 6 right now is probably going to drop out of the top 6.
Yeah.
I think that's probably going to be not the order in which it finishes, but that's going to be the 6 teams that finish in the top 6 spots. The question is going to be, 1, is it 7, 8, and 9, or is it just 7 and 8? And then the question is, who can go and kind of make that run to grab that final spot, or those 2 spots, in order to get themselves European football next season? And look, it's a distinct possibility. You look at Brentford there in 7th on 45, I think it is.
Yep.
And then Everton on 43, Newcastle on 42, Bournemouth, us on 41, Brighton, Sunderland on 40, and actually even Palace a little bit on 39, although I do think that their focus has gone this season, and kind of understandably so in many different ways. So you go all the way down to Sunderland, who have obviously slipped up of late. I think it's 4 losses from the last 6. But when you put it in the perspective of, Brighton have just won 3 of their last 4, having not won in 12. Bournemouth are like unbeaten in 10 games or something, but they've won 1 of them.
Yeah.
Like, the whole thing's bizarre. And Newcastle have suddenly decided they're going to wake up. So it's a decent and I think a fair competition. And I think it's going to be a very interesting end to the season in this perspective. I just want Fulham to be in it. And at the moment, and with the way we've played in the last 3 games, I feel like we're going to slide out of it.
Yeah, completely. And I think that ultimately we have to mostly focus on ourselves. But, the opportunity still is there, right?
Because none of these teams have been consistent all season, right? Like, even Brentford, who are the top of this pile, you look at them and you think, okay, they find these incredible wins in certain situations that no one is expecting them to do. And then they lose at home to Brighton in a game where they just didn't turn up whatsoever. And then the last night, 2-0 up, they draw with Wolves and potentially should have lost. Like, none of these teams have any consistency, and it's what's making this into such an interesting race.
Today's episode of the Thursday Club is brought to you by our friends at My Kind of Cruise, the world's first cruise booking app and website. And whilst Fulham haven't taken their opportunities to sound the horn, maybe they're heading for the beach. But you can still sound the horn on your very own cruise holiday this summer. Go to My Kind of Cruise and search through all of the different options that they have. If you want to cruise anywhere on planet Earth, My Kind of Cruise has all the different cruise lines and all the different routes that you can peruse at your leisure whenever you want. Download the app from the Google Play or Apple App Store, or go to mykindofcruise.com and use the discount code Fulhamish for an exclusive discount. It's all founded by a fellow Fulham fan, so if you use the website, you'll be supporting one of our own. That's My Kind of Cruise. Use the discount code Fulhamish and book yourself your dream 2026 summer escape. Well, that leads us nicely then on to Burnley on Saturday. Scott Parker's, who I must admit, I wasn't expecting him to still be in charge, given the season that the Clarets have had. I mean, I think it's safe to say they're gone at this point. 9 points adrift.
They're going.
Effectively 10 with the goal difference that they have. Been a funny old season, hasn't it? Like, they started quite well. The middle bit about Christmas, they must have lost. It felt like they lost 10 in a row, and we were one of them. And then the last few weeks, they've put up a quite brave fight, but you've never really had full confidence that they, obviously they've had some things not go their way. That game against Brentford, they were so unlucky. But then again, they did go 3-0 down in the first half.
I mean, so the crowd, they were being booed by their own crowd at that point. So it is one of those things where you're kind of looking at it and thinking, yeah, okay, you've put together a brave fight back, and you're a little bit unlucky that the leading goal doesn't go. It's offside, and it is offside. Yeah. And then the equaliser right at the end, the handball, that felt harsh. I think because it didn't feel particularly clear and obvious. But when you're putting it in the perspective of, it just feels like when it happened in the summer, when all of the business was done, I was talking to a few different people at these kind of football events, and there was all a fan from each club, etc. And the Burnley fan there, Jacob Horsfall, was basically like stood at the bottom of everything, be like, we're going down 20th, but it's okay, like we know it already. And that was sort of after the transfer window was done, and I was like, look, why? And he was like, one, this is what Scott Parker does, and two, he was like, the other thing is that everyone else has improved and brought in like genuine Premier League quality players. And he's like, whilst I think there are talented players in our squad, but I just don't think that our strikers are anywhere near up to the task of putting the ball in the back of the net enough. He was like, I like Zion Fleming, but he was like, I don't know why we've brought Armando Broja in. And also, you're looking at like a Lyle Foster and thinking there's flashes, but never any real consistency. It's like there's plenty in the midfield engine room, but you're also trying to replace the impact of Josh Brownhill, who obviously left last summer and who had been the key man really in their promotion run. And it just feels like there's just not been quite enough quality harnessed at the right times. I think maybe the thing with Scott Parker is, and maybe this is actually to credit him a little bit, I think he's gone from a manager who couldn't get the best out of players in certain situations when he was with us. And when we went down that season, It felt like that was a squad that was wasted. I think he has improved as a manager since then, but I still don't think he's the type of manager that's elevating a team. Whereas I think that, but I think you could probably maybe level something similar about Daniel Farke at Leeds. I just think that they have a better team, slightly better suited, and he's got a little bit more, I suppose, not skin in the game, but he's had a little bit more of the rough of the Premier League, with being called the worst Premier League manager ever at Norwich, and all of the elements of that, where he learned that he couldn't play the football that he wanted to play in the Championship. Parker's never done that, and he's never pretended to, right? His football is never that pretty. Even in the Championship with teams that are better than everyone else, it's pretty stodgy, defensively minded stuff. Whereas I think that what we're seeing now is a manager who is just, he probably has Burnley exactly where they should be. Right, like this is where this squad probably fits in the hierarchy. In fact, you could probably argue that they're a place above where they should be, but that might be due to Wolves being dreadful at the start of the season.
I think they will end up. I think the way that Wolves are playing right now and the confidence that they're showing, I mean, they're 3 points behind.
I mean,
admittedly, they've played a game more.
But Burnley also then spent like £100 million and something. They just spent it really badly. Well,
the thing I was surprised,
they just didn't fill the gaps properly.
The thing I was surprised, look, I like to pride myself that I have some good takes on football and that I predict things right. There is a tweet not that far down at Mr. Sammy James about this time last year where I said I have a funny feeling that Scott Parker and this Burnley team proved everyone wrong next year, because I looked at that defensive record in the Championship, the amount of clean sheets they kept, the fact that they were just so defensively sound, like one of the best defensive teams ever in Championship history. And I thought that's the kind of team that comes up to the Premier League and does well. Didn't help that effectively the foundations of that Burnley defence were built on low knees, basically, that they couldn't then bring back. I mean, they've conceded more goals than everyone in the league.
It doesn't help, though, that defensive wall was built on basically a three-man unit, right? It was James Trafford in goal. It was Maxime Esteve, who I still think is a very, very good player for what it's worth. And then CJ Egan-Riley. They lose two of those. And so you're real building from that. And like when you look at what's happened, I think Dubravka's done a good job in goal this season, but you're not keeping, one of the things I said at the start of the season was the difference between Leeds and Burnley. Leeds had a really good defensive record last year as well, right? But the difference was that Leeds kept opponents at bay by basically not defending deep, by pushing them back and refusing to let them get into their half, by dominating games. Whereas Burnley were more kind of, okay, we'll sit in and absorb pressure in the way that we've seen, for many years with Scott Parker. And that felt like it was maybe more translatable. But if you're building something that you think is going to be the basis for a Premier League side and then you have to tear it up and start again, it's never, ever going to have quite the same levels. And when you bring in Kyle Walker and say, okay, there's some experience there and he's done okay, I think is the truth of the matter. He's not been great, but he's done okay. You're then changing the entire kind of leadership operation of what you're doing as well. And that for me is the bit. They've never really settled on who's going to play alongside Esteve. Bashir Humphries, I think, has done, for the majority, an okay job, but it hasn't been glorious. And, there are parts of this Burnley side that I think Premier League sides will look at and go, yeah, you know what, I could deal with that. Hartman at left back, I think, has been genuinely quite good. Some real good connection with Zion Fleming up top. So has got a number of assists, actually. And I still do probably feel like someone like a Florentino Luis, who they have to buy in the summer for about £25 million, might end up being bought and immediately sold on because people will be like, that'd be a good squad player to have in the middle of the league. But the basic effective there, they're trying to build a squad here that is Premier League squad players for the teams who once maybe were challenging for 6th and 7th in the Europa League, who are now 13th and 14th in the table. And therefore, if you're buying maybe not cast-offs, obviously Florentino Luis comes from Benfica, but the clubs looking at him were the kind of like clubs like Fulham, but not necessarily to be a out-and-out dead-on starter. How many of this Burnley side start for Wolves? Because I don't think it's very many.
The only one that I have been impressed with this season, I've been very impressed with Zion Fleming whenever he's played.
Yeah,
and
he's a handful. He's
at
a
times where
unit.
Fulham haven't looked like we've had, a number 9 that can reliably do the job. And obviously,
Jadon Anthony, I think, has done a pretty good job over the course of the season.
Yeah, I just always wondered if Zion Fleming might be, Fulham, it looks like we're going to spend the money on Ricardo Pepi, but you wondered if you got someone like Fleming instead as the kind of foil for Muniz, that could be quite a good option.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we were going to do that, I would have liked us to go down the Strand Larsen route, who I just think is a better player than Zion Fleming. And yes, okay, it costs a certain amount of money, and you have to obviously put that on the table, but it does not miles over what we're going to pay for Pepe, I don't think. Like, if we were going to be in those kind of conversations, I think that's the way you kind of stretch to, and you go, okay.
Someone like Strand Larsen, though, comes to Fulham expecting to start as the automatic number 9. Someone like Fleming might come in and be like, you know what, I'm happy to be
fighting for my place.
Fighting as the kind of number 2 behind the Muniz, who's number 1, who, by the way, obviously, apart from the Forest game, is doing absolutely nothing for his, for the claim that he should be Fulham's starting number 9.
No, you know what? He was okay against Forest, and he's obviously working his way back to fitness.
I was really excited by Muniz against Forest. I was saying to Freddie over lunch, I said, the thing about Rodrigo Muniz is I'm not so worried about his finishing. I'm not so worried about him popping up in the box and creating chances. What he wasn't doing in the other games was bringing other people into play. And that's suddenly what he did do against Forest. He was winning those headers, and he's really great at like a big long ball, and he can guide his header and really cushion it and bring someone into play, or a really smart flick. He knows where everyone is.
Yeah, he's also an awkward man to mark, which is good. So I agree. I think that was one of the few major positives from the Forest game, was seeing him look a little bit more like a footballer again.
Yeah. So in terms of how Fulham approach this, look, I said it at the start, this is so must win. And I don't want to seem spoiled, because must wins really should be used for
relegation 6-pointers
or cup finals or things like that. Like, I guess if Fulham don't win,
contextualize it. It's not the end of days if Fulham don't. We're not going to get relegated if we lose to Burnley. But also, it's a must win if we want the rest of this season to carry any meaning. So, it's must win in the context of, if we don't win this game, we probably just sort of the rest of the season is just a shrug, isn't it? It's like we play out the games and the season will be done.
But
at
also,
the end.
you just wonder for like the future. Like going into a 3-week international break, we've lost to Burnley. We've got the Silva thing up in the air. I'm not saying that Silva's going to sign a new contract if we beat Burnley and leave if we lose. But like, I'm not miles off. I'm genuinely like not miles off. I feel like it's.
I think you might be miles off, but whatever. The
mood is going to be so different.
Yeah.
I mean, more to the point, like a win against Burnley won't paper over all the cracks.
No.
But a loss
would exacerbate all of the issues that we've seen in recent weeks. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I mean, also there is a little bit of poetic justice that can potentially be served here. If you cast your mind back to the 10th of May, 2021, Fulham played Burnley. I think it was a Monday night.
Yeah, we were relegated, weren't we?
We were relegated with a 2-0 loss. I think the scorers were Ashley Westwood and Chris Wood. Bad day to face Wood as a Fulham fan. But in terms of, Scott Parker was in the Fulham dugout that day and Fulham were relegated from the Premier League. Now, 5 years on, he's in the opposition dugout. Marco Silva has been at the helm for pretty much the entirety of those 5 years and is coming to an inflection point in his Fulham career. Can Fulham inflict the same kind of suffering on Burnley and that Burnley inflicted on us and Scott Parker at that time? But how the turns table in some ways.
I think what we have to be wary of here, I could see a scenario on Saturday where Fulham get the first goal, maybe even go 2-0 up. And obviously you saw what Burnley did to Palace, where they scored 3 goals in 3 minutes and it was absolutely amazing. They obviously also managed to rally against Chelsea at the Bridge and nearly won it. So nearly won it in the end. You saw what Everton did though. 2-0, solid. See you later. We're just a better team than you, and we don't give you a sniff. Fulham have to, and I get what you're saying at the beginning of, I want Marco to floor it and go for it.
Yeah, I do.
But I also...
I'll tell you what they won't come back from, 4-0 down.
But I would just be concerned, like, if you get to 2-0, just hold it. Just hold it and keep it sensible. That would be my feeling here, is just like, don't give away anything stupid. And I think you saw with that Brentford game last night, the fact that they let in that goal just before half time opened the floodgates, and you knew what was coming. And this Burnley team now are going to be at a stage where they probably know deep down that safety isn't going to happen, but they've got the sort of loose horse at the National kind of vibe to them, where they'll just enjoy spoiling everyone else's season.
Yeah, I mean, to an extent, I think with Wolves there's a real feeling and also like a growing camaraderie amongst the fan base. I don't think that's there at Burnley. Like I think that and there was a good piece on The Athletic about this. I can't remember who wrote it, but I apologise. But in terms of, there was just like the Burnley season has been a story of just not quite. And I think that the energy has gone out of the room. Like that game against Bournemouth, like on paper, that's a decent point against a mid-table side, but Burnley haven't got time for decent points. They need to win those kind of games at this point. And so I think that the energy is left in terms of where people are. Look, we don't know what the away end will look like, but I would be stunned if it's like completely full. Like, I don't think that there is a real energy around the club right now. I think there's a frustration. I think there's always this kind of grim settling in idea of Parker might as well be in charge next season now, because we're this close to the championship and we know he gets teams out of the championship. And maybe they're coming from a better platform next year if they do come up again to have a level of consistency. Sometimes it takes a couple of bounces, as we know, in order to find your feet again. But there's almost this kind of resignation to the idea that not only is this season maybe nearly done, but also that next year it might be more of the same from a managerial perspective. And I think that there's not loads of people... It's difficult to make the argument that he should sack him and get rid now because he's got a track record of getting teams up in the championship. I think maybe the thing that's being mooted, and I was reading this in some comments, it was like, we should keep him, get promoted, and on the day we get promoted, sack him. Like, sack him the day we get promoted and bring in a manager for the Premier League. And you know what? That sounds incredibly harsh, But also, I can understand the logic of it as well.
Where does Scott Parker go? And I promise that this shouldn't be called the Burnley-ish podcast today, but it is interesting. He was.
There's not loads to talk about.
No. He was our manager. Where does he go from here? Because
imagine to another championship club who want to be promoted.
But does that keep you motivated at night, being a championship specialist? Just getting teams promoted and then getting fired? Because surely at some point he's got to prove it. And I mean, Daniel Farker has finally kind of got rid of the tag of being just a championship specialist and an absolute Premier League loser.
But we talk about players like this. We talk about loads of players and we're like, yeah, really good in the championship, not quite good enough for the Premier League. Like, why should it be any different with a manager? Like, there's a level of, that's still a pretty high achieving level of management within the game. Right? Like, bear in mind, if you're looking at it from an English perspective, that makes you effectively like the 19th best manager in England.
Yeah, but there's a way of being a player where you could go up to the Premier League and be, I guess...
You can be an assistant.
I'm not saying that, you can manage in the Championship, but you're an assistant in the Premier League.
As in, like, genuinely, and I mean this without, like, jokes or remorse, like, obviously, if Tottenham get relegated, Scott Parker is going to be Tottenham manager in the Championship next season. Like, 100% nailed on.
No.
Never seen anything more nailed on in my life.
Never.
He's the only one who would take it.
Are you joking?
No. Like 100%. He's like a Spurs guy. He's come up there. He's done like the management courses there. Like 100%. Like, to be honest, I think there's probably an argument that if West Ham go down, that Scott Parker might become West Ham manager.
I can't believe that you would even... that's never happening in a million years. What, people are going to be paying, £1,500 for a season ticket in the South Stand watching Parker football in the Championship?
They're not going to be paying £1,500 a ticket in the South Stand full stop. They're just not going to be there. So, like, it doesn't really matter. It's about getting out of the Championship.
I hadn't even considered that. I just cannot believe that will happen.
But at the end of the day, West Ham and Tottenham, all they need from that season is just to get promoted.
Promotion.
And Scott Parker has got 3 promotions on his CV, so
but
obviously it's not
how
inspiring.
Many times, and this is going to be really embarrassing when you come back with a million examples of when this has worked, but of teams sacking their manager that gets them promoted from the Championship, coming up, getting a Premier League manager. Obviously, it's happened like a season or two after, like a Southampton did it,
Nigel Atkins,
and Brighton did it. But like, has it worked many times where literally you've callously got, and after all those memories, you know what it's like when you get promoted with a manager and you get promoted, you've got to be pretty cold-hearted as an owner to not give that manager time to prove themselves.
But I also think this is the thing with Parker. If you then look at the squads he's managed, right? And again, like, I think our squad is the most obvious example of a squad that couldn't compete. That could have competed, that he didn't able to.
The only thing he had such different. I always see that bloody graphic of the lineup against West Brom, and like, don't get me wrong, like, it is pretty criminal that a team of Anguissa, Lookman, Mitro, Ruben Loftus-Cheek couldn't be moulded into something.
I swear on this podcast.
But you have to remember the context that he had 3 weeks between the Championship playoff final and the first game of the season, and we effectively might as well have had a points deduction that our start of the season was such a basket case bad.
Yeah, I like, obviously I agree with all of that. Like, but also then Gary O'Neill took his Bournemouth side, who, he'd been battered at Anfield, and look, anyone could get it at Anfield, like, especially in that era.
Yeah.
And then just made them into a competent unit, right? Like, quite quickly. But I do think he has grown as a manager. Like, I do think he has got better at what he's doing. If you were West Ham or Spurs and he got you out of the Championship and you gave him just like half decent Premier League players, I think he would be fine. I don't think he'd be taking you to any grand heights, but I don't think he'd get relegated again.
No, I just can't. I cannot believe that they would go for him. He's a fascinating, paradox, because it's. Yeah, I mean, we haven't seen a real Championship specialist, I guess, since Warnock. But Warnock at least did go to the Premier League a few times and prove himself.
Yeah. I mean, look, the other thing I suppose about Parker is he's still relatively young, right? He only stopped playing, a decade ago?
Yeah, of course. I mean, he's still got a long way to go, but you just wonder what that motivation is as a manager to just keep going again, do the Championship slog. Oh, now I get sacked.
But that's kind of what he was like as a player, wasn't it? It's just like a bit of like a workhorse shuttleman. Like he just sort of got about and did what he needed to do, and like did it with kind of minimal fuss.
Even
it just feels exactly what he's like as a manager.
Yeah, I mean, you feel for Burnley, right? Because like they are in the yo-yo space that Fulham have occupied, but I think even more extreme. I.e., like Fulham got promoted 2 out of 3 times via the playoffs. Burnley keep getting automatic promotion and coming down. Like that is, Fulham did not, apart from the final time, steamroll the Championship. Burnley do every single time, get 90 to 100 points. Like they really are too good for the Championship. But then they get to the Premier League and you just kind of know.
But they've tried all sorts of different things, right? And look, this is not the club that they envisaged when there was the takeover, right? From Alan Pace and all of that. There was a team that had spent, and the year they relegated us, I think they guaranteed that day their 6th consecutive Premier League season. So, like, things change very quickly, but also it is worth bearing in mind that whilst Burnley are a kind of storied old club, they're also a relatively small club, right? Like, they still do have a pretty small, place in the pantheon. And yes, there is, some cool rivalries associated with that, and it's an area which is a hotbed for different football clubs and founding football clubs as well. Like, I'm not taking away from anything. Obviously, my wife is from that neck of the woods.
Yeah.
But in terms of what they are as kind of income and what Turf Moor holds, etc., they're still a club punching a little bit above their weight. In the same way that we might be considered to be by space, or Bournemouth might be considered to be, or Brentford might be considered to be, still punching above their weight, just in a slightly different way. So this is still relative years of success in some regards, and we should always remember that for us as well. Like, as much as we want more constantly, obviously, like these are still kind of halcyon days in some ways that we're not involved in these mad relegation battles, and relegation fights are so much fun when you're not in them. They're really not fun when you are. No. And it's very easy to forget that, I think, in the light of like constantly wanting more.
One thing that's interesting that I saw, obviously tickets for this game sold out about 5-6 days ahead of the match.
On the exchange.
I mean, I will say tickets have been incredibly reasonably priced for this game. You could have picked up a ticket in the Hammersmith end, I think, for £31.
As it should be.
Well, this is the thing, and I feel kind of like I'm honestly delighted, but then you can't help but go like, well, what if this was just always?
It's real hate to take our soldiers, though, isn't it? Kind of stuff.
I mean, I've always said that, like, when you see the amount of away fans that fill the home ends and stuff, and people might say, "Oh, Fulham don't have enough fans." There is, even going back to like 2010, we would play Wigan. And it would be full of Fulham fans. Like you would play teams that do not bring more away fans than they can fill, and you will fill it, but you have to price it at the right price. And lo and behold, I'm really excited for Saturday. I think it's going to be a great atmosphere as a result. I think a lot of people have obviously looked at this and gone, you know what? I can't normally afford a ticket to go to Fulham, but it's £30. I'm going to especially go to this one. So I kind of, on one hand, want to be like, kudos to the club. Kind of, finally, you've priced a game perfectly and like it's sold out.
Just normally.
Yeah, I guess. But like, but on the other hand, can't but help be deeply frustrated of like, why can't you see this? Like, because for the Villa game in a couple of weeks, the tickets go back up to £100. Yeah. It's going to be 12:30, and we're going to have big swathes of empty seats. And even if it's officially a sellout, we know that it won't really be a sellout because the ticket exchange won't have been opened.
Yep.
And lots of people won't be there. And so it's so frustrating on the other hand, but I don't want to use a positive as a negative.
Yeah, no. I know what you mean. But yeah, it is just mad what you can do when you just do things normally. Like when you just, like, there's the whole argument. You're like, what we should do is have one person in every room who's just sitting there being like, are we being stupid? Are we going to look stupid? And if the answer is yes, maybe don't do that thing.
finally, Jack, little fun game to play. It is the 18th of March as we release this, which means it is my dad's 70th birthday.
Happy birthday, Clive.
I should mention that. Happy birthday, Clive. He'll be listening. But more importantly, sorry, Dad, it is the 16th anniversary of Fulham 4, Juventus 1, 5-4 on aggregate. So got a little game here. I don't know if this is sacrilege to do, but I've got a combined 11 of Fulham team from that night, that famous night, and then the Fulham team from... Is this okay to do?
I don't think it's sacrilege.
Yeah? Okay. All right, fine. So I've got
I don't think there's many of our current squad that are going to get in, but also I don't really know. Let's do it.
I guess the part of the point was that it was always a team more than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. We'll start off with Mark Schwarzer in goal.
Schwarzer.
Okay.
But like a million miles.
Yeah, I mean, like Schwarzer probably was...
Schwarzer might be our second best ever goalkeeper, like in the modern, like obviously in my lifetime.
Yeah, okay. I always forget that he played this game. Stephen Kelly.
Love Stephen Kelly, but it's Kenny Tete.
Yeah, okay.
Like I think there is a fair argument you can make that Kenny Tete is like Fulham's best player, representative to what they are like to every position in the world. Like, I think it would have been Anthony Robinson last year, like as the closest up the who's the closest player we have to like the top of their depth chart worldwide. I think like Jeddah would have probably been in that conversation, but considering that this season's been a massive downturn, I still think Kenny Tete is like the fifth best right back in the Premier League.
Yeah. Okay. Paul Konchesky. Is it Anthony Robinson?
Maybe not in current form, but yes, like it is Anthony Robinson.
Paul Konchesky was brilliant. And I think he's so tarnished by that move to Liverpool in the wide...
Paul Konchesky was brilliant for us, like absolutely sensational. I like absolutely loved him. I just like, again, like to come back to that point, I don't think at any point I had like a consideration that like Paul Konchesky was a top 5 left back in the world. Whereas I think you could have genuinely made that argument for Anthony Robinson at points in his career.
I think the two centre-backs we're not going to have too much debate over.
The two centre-backs are staying rock solid.
Hangland and Hughes.
Yeah, then that's...
Is it, what about if...
Nah. That is sack. Now you're bordering on sacrilege. Breaking up the Thames barrier. Are you joking?
But if like they're on their own, if it was just like
it's Hangland and Hughes.
But if it was Hangland versus Bassey, take out Aaron Hughes.
Okay, it's Hangland over Bassey and it's Hughes over Anderson.
Okay. All right, I'm just playing devil's advocate. I agree with you for what it's worth. I'm just double checking that you'd like fully considered. The mad thing is the centre midfield that played that night. Chris Baird, obviously a man that could play many positions, but he did play centre mid that night because Murphy was suspended. And Dixon Atuhu. Obviously, we don't quite play the same formation anymore, but we'll go Sander Berger and Alex Iwobi just for sake of ease here.
I think Iwobi gets in over... Let's say Baird because he wasn't actually a centre midfielder.
I think a Dixon Atuhu, Alex Iwobi midfield's quite fun.
Yeah, it'd be bosh. I'd love that.
Just Dixon doing bits.
Yeah, let's go with Atuhu and Iwobi.
I think Dixon Atuhu would be... Yeah, I think it'd be good.
Iwobi, Atuhu midfield be vibes.
Yeah?
I'm having a good time with that.
All right, okay. So then we're looking at...
also, though, if I would have gone Murphy Iwobi if Murphs was playing, but obviously he didn't in this game.
Yeah, fine. And then on the left, obviously, you got Damien Duff. I mean, who is the left winger for us currently?
Kevin, no, like it's Duffer.
Whoever it is.
It's Duffer.
Yeah, obviously. Right-hand side, Simon Davies.
This is...
Simon Davies or Harry Wilson?
The all-Welsh battle.
I'm going Simon Davies, I think.
I actually think I'd go Wilson. And Wilson would have been loads of fun in this team as well.
But
although, we did play with inverted wingers. Yeah. I think Harry Wilson would have fitted this team really nicely.
So I do
love Digger.
But I just think that like Simon Davies was too magical. Like the magic moments that Davies produced, he also was capable of. Obviously, I think like Harry may be a more technically gifted player than Simon Davies, but Simon stepped up so much.
Yeah, obviously scored some of the most important goals of this entire campaign. I still think I'm taking Wilson. I think Wilson.
I would stick with Davies. Maybe that's just pure nostalgia though, where you kind of had Gira up front, but let's just say he was a
Call
10.
him the 10.
Let's
He's
call him a
staying in the 10.
Gira or Smith Rowe?
Gira.
Gira or King?
Gira.
Fine, okay. And then Bobby Zamora or Raul Jimenez?
Ooh.
I think I'm going Zamora.
I actually think Raul Jimenez is a better player than Zamora.
Technically, yes.
No, I just think even in his pomp, like I think that like we're.
Oh, I mean, I think you got.
No, I mean Zamora in his pomp, like which he kind of was at this point.
Yeah, this was
obviously
very
a bit
much
injured.
more in his pomp. Right now, we've got like Raul Jimenez, who is 35, but like I think if you basing it on 29,
We were super physical at this point. Yeah, I think it's probably Zamora, but that's really close.
Okay, so actually. If I'm not mistaken, I think you've gone for more current players than...
I've gone Schwarzer, Hangeland, Hughes.
Yeah, 3. You went for a Tuhu, that's 4.
Tuhu, Gira, Duff, and Zamora as 7.
Okay, 7. Fair. Okay, my bad.
I've lived in 4. I had to think about 5. I had to think about a 5-6 split. I had a thought about Raul.
Probably a silly question, but manager.
Oh,
It's Sir Roy. Like ultimately, we're achieving similar things. Apart from we haven't got a European run. This is what I said about Marco Silva in terms of until Fulham get to Wembley for a final. Or until, something is won or we get to Europe, like, there's no way that he can be like in a way that Oliver Glasner is, be like, I am actually Crystal Palace's greatest ever manager. I think Marco had the opportunity here over these years to cement himself as Fulham's greatest ever manager. I think maybe the argument goes that it probably still is Alex Stark. But the only other option for me
I think as well
is Roy Hodgson for getting us to a European final. I think it's Stock
and also
Hodgson.
this is Roy then. There was an element of Roy in the final years and the Palaces, the Watfords and all of that. Like,
Good job at Palace.
No, I know he did a good job, but he never hit the heights of this. Again, I think he was scarred by what happened at Liverpool and then at England, and I don't think he was quite the same manager. I don't think he was but when he came to Fulham, he was at the top of his game, and so therefore I think if you're comparing it like for like, yeah, I probably am just going for Hodgson because I think that was a once in a generation move for Fulham. It was such a smart hire. You got someone that was out of favour but was actually incredibly talented.
Yeah, 100%.
So much so that the national team came calling for him.
Exactly, and that's only happened once before with Keegan.
All right, that'll do for the podcast. By the way, we'll put a link in the description. It's still worth a listen now. We did the Unforgettable podcast, which was the documentary. It's about 5 or 6 years old, but we'll put a link into it. And if you haven't listened, it's a full documentary of everything that happened that night against Juventus, people that were there. I remember Philippe Auclair was on that podcast and was particularly brilliant the way that he described it from the press box. Definitely worth a listen. And yeah, we'll stick a link in the description either on Spotify, Apple or YouTube, wherever you consume the podcast. And that'll do for the show today. Jack Collins, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sammy. It was a pleasure.
Taffy the dog, thank you very much. Hope that you guys watching on YouTube enjoyed her fairly frequent disruptions during this episode. Thank you very much to Freddie on the buttons. And we will be back after the Burnley game looking at everything that happens in the match at Craven Cottage. Have a great weekend. You whites.
You whites.